so much. Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be here at this great conference, Capital for Good. And I didn't get a chance to go to the earlier sessions, but I'm really looking forward to financial inclusion in the digital age and how to think about climate technology. Today, I have the privilege of sitting here with three great speakers, Kevan, Keith, and Chrissybil. And we're going to talk about the way to think about entrepreneurship. For those who don't know me, I teach entrepreneurial strategy and how to think about entrepreneurship as a force for good, not just in the typical way we think of entrepreneurship, but the force for good, which is it brings innovation and technology, and that creates employment and growth and economic opportunity, which is all true. But they're actually thinking a little bit beyond that and pushing that to actually think more directly about social impact. And so I mean, do you guys want to introduce yourselves first? Tell us what you do, and then we'll go from that, and we have some questions prepared, and at the end, we'll do some question and answer. Do we start with you, Kevan?
Yeah, certainly. Hi, everyone. I'm Kevan de Silva, founder of Impactica Labs. We are a fintech focused on helping individuals harness their own financial data in order to enroll in public benefits programs such as Medicaid and SNAP. We work with health insurers, nonprofits, and state agencies to provide a sign-up experience that's a little more like signing up for a service like Venmo or PayPal compared to the multi-page documents and applications today that require a lot of manual paperwork. I think it's been acknowledged by even the current administration that there's something called a time tax on low-income Americans in order to access these benefits. So we're looking to optimize that process for them with the same tools that at this point underpin a lot of consumer fintech experiences. So yeah, excited to be here to talk to you about what we're working on.
Hi everyone, my name is Chrissybil Boulin. I am the founder of Vero Learning, and we are a career guidance and job placement platform that helps young adults between ages of 16 to 21 transition from the classroom into the workforce. As I'm sure you guys are aware, the cost of college is going up exponentially, and so many students, especially those from disadvantaged backgrounds, just see college as not being attainable or affordable. At the same time, we've got companies that are looking to expand the requirements in terms of who they're looking for and are not requiring college degrees. So our goal is to meet students where they're at instead of traditional recruiting platforms like LinkedIn and Indeed that assume that you already know what you're good at and who you need to connect to. We focus on self-discovery, career exploration, and pre-employment skills training. And so our goal is to reach out to school districts and NGOs to onboard students at no cost to them and eventually incorporate AI into our offering so we can connect our talent pipeline to corporate hiring managers that are looking for early career talent.
Perfect. And my name is Keith Camhi. I'm the managing director of the Techstars Economic Mobility accelerator powered by Samvid Ventures. And these are two of our portfolio companies, so excited to be with them here. And so my current role is as an investor in early stage companies that are trying to have an impact in different categories. My career has been an entrepreneur. I started a venture-backed company which raised a bunch of capital, and then started a franchise rollout, which we did kind of the keep it small, own it all model, and customer financing, either one of which can be very attractive depending on what you're pursuing. And then for the last 10 years or so, I've been advising entrepreneurs. And for the last 5 years, I've been doing it on a platform called Techstars. And if you're not familiar with Techstars, the brief headlines are that we're one of a couple major startup accelerators globally. We're often the year by year, it varies, but we're currently the largest investor by volume in pre-seed companies worldwide. We invest in about 500-600 companies a year, $120,000 early stage check, and then a 3-year accelerator program in which we surround them with a bunch of mentorship. We run these programs in nodes of a dozen companies at a time, and those nodes tend to be sponsored in different ways, either by limited partners in the conventional venture capital structure or by particular partners. So in the case of the program I run, I've always focused on our social impact programs at Techstars out of personal interest, but our partner for this is a group called Samvid Ventures, which is a philanthropic impact investor, and they fund our annual programming for 3 programs a year of 12 companies, and they help us set the theme for it. So the theme of our dozen companies all have something to do with economic mobility for low and moderate incomes. I've also run programs with Melinda Gates's fund focused on future longevity, and with JP Morgan focused on underrepresented entrepreneurs. So happy to answer any questions about our focus in the impact category. Not all of our programs are impact per se, but it's an important part of the programs that I run.
I think that was an awesome overview of Techstars, because for those of you that don't know Techstars, and Keith gave a great explanation, they're really pioneers. I mean, they think they really pioneered the accelerator model at the time, and they always had a view that there's a lot more happening in the US than a few kind of high-end founders coming from some places. So they were the first ones, for example, to have an accelerator in places like Rochester, places like St. Louis, kind of having a bet in every city across the US, being able to create innovation entrepreneurship. And now they're doing it again by going beyond the main, beyond your classic profit motive, and then go and doing social impact. So I want to ask about that, because that is pretty visionary. And so let me begin actually with that conversation, which is, I heard very clear arguments by both Kevan and Chrissybil about how their companies work, right? There's very clear statement about where's this gap to be filled. Kevan mentioned the time tax, which has been very well documented in research. And I just want to take a step back and say, where do ideas come from for you? Where do you get this idea? How do you identify this gap for those students here that want to have an impact, but actually are not sure how to find a problem? How do you both go about it? And then Keith, how does he go about it on the investment side?
For me, this is my second time around as a founder. My previous business is a tutoring company, and we, ironically, are very well known for SAT prep. And so we made the Forbes list. We helped thousands of kids save millions off of tuition, and we thought we were doing a really great job helping our community. And then the pandemic hit, and we started receiving calls from high school kids asking for tutoring, which absolutely never happens. And for a majority of these kids, they had really high GPAs going into their senior year, and as distance learning persisted, their grades started to drop. And if they couldn't afford private tutoring, many of them were really unsure of how they'd be able to enter college. And so that's when we realized that we're missing out on a really important subset. And these are kids that are highly motivated, but just don't have a pathway to college. And so for me, finding the problem was very much like based on my own experience, talking to students in the community. We did customer discovery and found out that 80% of high school seniors were not ready to make college or career decisions. We were even more shocked to find out that 60% of them had less than 5 conversations with any adults in their lives about their next steps. And so that really helped us to kind of define what the problem was, do more customer discovery with hiring managers so that we could come up with a solution.
Can I just add, for the one thing Chrissybil didn't mention in her intro, she's also a Forbes 30 under 30 winner, is that correct? Through the previous company.
Correct.
And it was really kind of, even then you're deciding to change this into this new idea. So I just want to emphasize how successful our founders are. We're really some of the best. I thought it was really interesting that you understood a problem and then used customer discovery to validate that problem. And something we teach here in Colombia is that sort of you need a hypothesis first to do your customer discovery rather than hoping it brings the answer. Sorry, go ahead, Kevan.
Oh, no problem. Like Sybil, this is actually my second venture, but this is my first social enterprise. I spent a few years after my last company working in the nonprofit sector, and I think for anyone familiar with sort of civic society, it's very difficult for them to make investments in technology. They're obviously very mission-driven organizations, and sometimes you're unable to necessarily address things at the scale you'd like to because you can only deal with what's right in front of you. And what me and my partners in Impactica realized is that there's been these revolutions that have gone on from mobile to fintech that have completely passed by the nonprofit sector, but then also largely government. It's been very difficult for governments and industries like healthcare to necessarily integrate some of the latest technology that's not only proven in the private sector, but has also been adopted by consumers, right? So I mentioned earlier Venmo and PayPal. I mean, I think if I took a poll of this room, I'd say vast majority probably use those services, but the underlying technology that helps you connect your bank account is something a lot more people are familiar with. But what we came to recognize is that same connections and those data connections can actually help the civic sector as well optimize delivering their services. So this is money that's allocated to government services and delivering essential services to people, but a problem is access. People are unable to get what they need done in a time, in a way that's manageable for them. So why wouldn't we apply these optimizations that have been so successful in the private sector to civic service as well?
So that's interesting. Both cases are really building on your own personal and industry experience, and it's only by getting embedded that you were able to observe these problems. Now, Keith, how did you, on your end, from more the program side, how do you decide to start an accelerator focus on this double bottom line? Especially, let me swap this a little bit to also ask, one might think there's a trade-off in terms of getting returns, and so how do you guys think about that as well? So both things.
Yeah, great question. And you know, in part, and maybe I'll also tie it to how we think about finding great entrepreneurs for these programs. So I'll answer the first question and then loop it back to that. But so tactically, what we do is each of our Techstars programs are funded in a different way. Some of them are funded by limited partners in our so-called city funds, like Techstars New York, Techstars Chicago, Techstars LA, and then some of them are funded by a partner who has a dual goal. So Techstars Media Tech funded by Comcast, Techstars InsurTech funded by MetLife, and so forth. And that might be part of their innovation strategy, or Techstars Alabama Power, focused on power. It might be something they're doing for their particular city, you know, focused on Birmingham, Alabama, or Atlanta with Cox. In the case of our social impact programs, which have included longevity, Cox Impact has one, and Samvid Ventures, it's usually started by our funding partner coming to us and them saying, hey, we want to support entrepreneurs in this category. In the case of impact funds, they're usually saying, in both cases actually, they have philanthropic dollars that are going to grant making and other things, but they have all said that we see that innovation comes disproportionately from the private enterprise as opposed to from grant giving, and so we want to fund entrepreneurs who are working on these challenging problems. And their goal is to help these companies build great companies. These founders build great companies. And so we are targeting full market returns while having an impact. And so the way in which we think about doing that is, in Techstars, we have a pretty set formula on how we look at potential entrepreneurs at their earliest stages. And we say there are 6 criteria at Techstars broadly, and then we layer an additional lens on top of it with our verticals. So our 6 criteria are the first 3 are team. And it's all about the people at this early stage, and that means a few different things. It's ability to articulate the vision. To your point on how do you find an idea, it's ability to articulate the problem. Why were you put on this planet to solve this problem? What unique insight do you have to this problem? So usually an entrepreneur is solving some problem that they've seen or that really bothers them, and they want to try to overcome, so they're likely to run through walls to make it work because it really bothers them. Entrepreneurship is hard. You hit roadblocks, so what's going to keep you on course? We want someone who's highly motivated. So the founder has a real conviction and some capability to articulate the vision and bring people along. And then the next 3 things are large markets, which means the problem is big, some traction, so some evidence that you've done the customer discovery and have found that people want to use what you would be building or are building. And then finally, the idea itself. And we say the idea is the last on our list, not because it's unimportant, but because we know a startup can pivot so much. So our bet is that putting a really good team on a really big problem is more likely to succeed than an okay team working on a really good idea. And so that's our formula. When we then layer the impact lens on it, we simply want the company to be working on something that aligns with the theme of the program, but with a full profit motive. So every one of the companies in our program is doing something that would benefit low to moderate income individuals if their company were to succeed. And then our goal is to help them maximize their outcomes, because the bigger the company gets, the more impact they're going to have. And we don't think of it, we don't have to think about it separately then. We just know that by backing this company and making them profitable and as big as they can get, they're going to have more impact. And in fact, I'll just share that when we try to do a matrix, right? So business school, you got to do a matrix, right? So and we do it as on one axis, you look at a potential for impact, and the other axis, potential for returns. And we look at any company in our impact portfolio, it ends up aligning directly across the diagonal, meaning that as long as they have an impact objective in what they're trying to do, as long as they're aligned with the theme, the better the company does, the more impact they're going to have, because you can be highly impactful and stay small, and you're going to impact hundreds of people, or you can be 90% on target for the impact, but get really big, and that's going to have a bigger outcome on both returns and impact. So the answer is that we try not to sacrifice returns. The jury will be out 10 years from now on how everyone does, but we're targeting full market returns to get.
That's really fascinating because you're looking at the market problem in the right space, but then executing on that problem.
Correct.
I think it's also really interesting that you mentioned team. First, you mentioned the passion, and one thing we know from research is that, passion. Sometimes you would think, it make entrepreneurs over-optimistic, it would make them not rational enough, but it also sustains their work and their effort. And what we know is that kind of the sustaining of the work and effort and understanding of the problem actually ends up being a lot more beneficial than the over-optimism they might have. Let me also mention team, because the one thing that I find really interesting about your accelerator that you're both part of is that it is focused on this theme of social impact. And so I suspect, right, part of the hypothesis is that there's something about having peers in this same space, right? I mean, you mentioned these companies are profitable, so presumably you could join other accelerators that have nothing to do with a specific theme. And so what is it about peers what in startups? What is it about peers in your model? And how does being around other companies focused on social impact make a difference, both for you guys, from your personal experience, as well, Keith, in the design of the accelerator?
So we're only about halfway through our program, I believe, Keith, and it's been great. I think for us, we came in with an idea of how we can align our business objectives, but also our impact objectives. But sitting with our peers, I think, has really helped refine it for ourselves, but also in observing how, let's say, Sybil thinks about things on that alignment as well. So it's been great. I think we have a little more work to do, but it's been a great experience so far.
Absolutely. Techstars has been amazing. Being an entrepreneur is definitely a lonely journey. There are a lot of uncertainties. You're betting your career and your expertise and your network and maybe your future on your idea. And so it can be really stressful. And being a part of the Techstars program has just made life feel a lot better. I can walk in to the office and see incredible founders working on great solutions. We can brainstorm with one another. I have a cohort mate who's working on something similar and wasn't thinking about different markets that he could penetrate into, like colleges that are looking to create a pipeline from high school into universities. And so I think it's great to just bounce ideas off of one another, and their energy is definitely contagious. I find myself wanting to work an extra hour or two just being around my classmates. And I think that as we continue to grow, there are synergies and alignment. So we've discussed, well, your product comes in at middle school stage and my product is at high school stage, and maybe 5 years down the line, my students will need your product. And so I think the relationships we're building are not only useful to us as we're getting started, but are really going to help us as we continue to launch our businesses.
And then for our part, we run different flavors of accelerator, and so there are some that are just kind of general and theme agnostic, and so there'd be companies of all different categories in it that might be from the same city, and then there are some that are vertically aligned, and I like the vertical ones for a couple reasons. One is the pure interaction which you get from people in a similar boat, but then also we bring in mentors. So we bring in 100 mentors or so to surround a program that come and meet with the companies. And when there's a vertical focus, we're able to bring in real subject matter expertise to that vertical. So we can bring in investors who are interested in the vertical. And so we're able to surround with a lot more resources that are specific. And then the ways in which we try to structure the founders to support one another, it's not just Techstars supporting them, but for instance, we run forums every week and do peer-to-peer sharing, and it's if anyone's familiar with a YPO forum or a Vistage forum, it's similar to that, where you tend to have 8 to 12 people in a confidential group that are in a similar place to share not just how the business is going, but very importantly, because the founder journey is quite lonely, and the CEO is a very lonely position, share not just how the business is going, but also how's family going, how's your personal life going, and share the challenges of going through entrepreneurship in this seat. And and people come into a forum, whether it be YPO or Techstars one, with the objective of it being for business, but they leave with it being much more about camaraderie and supporting through some challenges in life, health, family members, whatever it might be. And so that shared journey ends up being extremely valuable in any accelerator program, but even more so when they're working on similar themes.
That's interesting. I mean, two things that I noticed that you guys mentioned that investors, there's actually a lot more overlap when you're an accelerator that has a special theme. In customer understanding, I think Chrissybil emphasized that it's actually, those discussions turn out to be a lot more fruitful when you're focusing on this theme, which is in part exactly why we're doing this conference, right? Really focused on capital for good. Let me shift gears though, because I think one of the things when you think about capital for good is, there's synergies and trade-offs, and there's benefits about thinking about impact and capital, but it's sometimes a little hard for people in this conversation to understand what is the target, right? If you're just focusing on profits, then it's easy to understand what your target's going to be. It's maximizing, return on capital, things like that. And so, let me not ask, what is from an accounting measure, but what does success look like for each of you 5 years from now or 10 years from now for this project, when you're thinking about your company, entrepreneurial success, but also social impact and all of that together?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think relative to some other companies in our cohort, have a great alignment, and our objective was to drive enrollments in these essential programs, right? And that was what we set out to do, is to make sure that people can access them, but then also that they're resilient in their ability to continue to be served. So for us, it happens to be that aligns with our profit motive too, which is we are paid on a usage basis by nonprofits, governments, healthcare providers to help individuals get access to services. So it happens to be convenient that works out for us that way in our business model. But I think as far as long term, we want to be that essential infrastructure. The way that I mentioned direct bank connections have become essential to financial services, in the same way we want to be that essential infrastructure to these safety net programs. So for us, our broader vision is finding all these places that we can attack as a problem to ameliorate what are essentially, whether it's a matter of legacy systems or antiquated processes, whether we can optimize and automate some of those things through technology. So our objective is to find ways that we have real stickiness in delivering real value, not only to the organizations that implement our technology, but also drive the outcomes we're trying to do for the public.
Right, and for us, we know that there are currently 17 million high schoolers enrolled in public schools in the U.S. It's a really big market. We are going into the HR and recruiting space. So first, we're focusing on getting kids on board, helping them figure out what they're good at, what potential career pathways might be, and then eventually connecting them with their first job. And so recruiting and training is a $100 billion market in the US. It's growing over $10 billion a year. And so our goal is really to modernize our education system. 5-10 years from now, our goal is to serve over 5 million students, help them get into fulfilling career pathways, and really ensure that no student is graduating high school feeling so hopeless. I think it's crazy that something like this doesn't exist already, because there are just so many different ways that people are talented. We're learning more and more about the different sorts of IQ, whether it be emotional. And I think it's really important that students know that regardless of where they're coming from, if college is not an option for them, that their skills are still useful to our society. And so that's really our goal, is to provide a pathway, to provide a beacon of hope. And so we want high school kids to know that if college isn't for them, Vero Learning is going to support them throughout their journey.
Yeah. And for our part, it's interesting because I think inherent in the question a little bit is the double bottom line negatively impact potential for hitting your other goals, right? Because as soon as you have two things, then you don't have just the. And so as a venture investor, I am measured on IRR, internal rate of return. I've got to return capital times, multiple times for this to happen. And so the venture economics, if you've looked at this at all, is that it's a power law game, meaning that individual large successes disproportionately drive that outcome. So a whole lot of companies hitting doubles and singles is not a good outcome for a venture capitalist. You need one company to get really big, maybe a second or third one to do pretty well, and then you expect a few to maybe just return capital, and a few might not even make it. And that's kind of the economics of venture. And so I'm going to be ultimately measured on my internal rate of return. The double bottom line aspect of it is a is a selection constraint, right? And so, but it doesn't have anything to do with who I'm. So it's a binary. If a company is not an impact company that's related to economic mobility, they won't get into this program. We get hundreds of applicants. Many good companies that were not adequately on theme for us didn't get in as a result, and maybe were accelerator worthy. And so when you think about the double line impact and make it tangible, then if I were picking any given program, if they said, hey, if I could perfectly know the future and pick the 12 best candidates for this program without a constraint, it might have been these 12, but then as soon as you put the constraint on, maybe half the companies didn't meet our filter, so maybe I'm drawing from the top 25. Will that impact the outcomes? It's hard to say. We have to look into the future, but there's enough uncertainty on who's going to be successful that I think our top 40 was really good. And so I think that we are so the math there is that I think we get full internal rate of return if I would have had pretty good success picking from the top 40 or the top 25, as opposed to it having to be the top 12. And I think in Techstars, where we get a lot of applications, that is the case. And so I'm optimistic that it's full IRR, and that one of you will be the lottery ticket. So right, venture is a collection of lottery tickets. One of you, maybe both of you, because that'll be double my IRR. Yeah. But so I'm betting on this being a full return. Otherwise, I should go run a different Techstars program if I didn't think that, because it won't look good for my outcomes.
So that's really interesting. This is really well documented in research as well. I mean, you can separate companies that have some shot, and you can use certain measures to like the vast majority of local businesses. But once you're at the top end and it's not that slim, right, then it's really hard, and doesn't matter how you try to dissect it. There's the powered law outcomes that you mentioned, and those that don't do this now, but go look up powered laws in Wikipedia. Fascinating. You'll be mind blown how skewed the outcome. As skewed as you think the outcomes are, they're even more skewed. Okay. I think that's the way I think about them. So that's a great explanation of success. I think, to me, what I take away from the three comments is that they're really focused on finding the right customer. It's sort of a two-step process, right? Find the right customer, and within that, just build a great business, right? And that seems I'm curious your thoughts on the following thesis, because it seems somewhat different to where I started 12, 15 years ago thinking about capital for good, which is when I was doing an MBA just like this one at MIT, and we were, Muhammad Yunus had just won a Nobel Prize, and there was a lot about big corporations, and there was a lot about social, like, there's social companies, and there's sort of companies that seem to have also these dual goals, but the thesis was to have them. Actually, it was almost sort of a nonprofit that was able to sustain itself. That was sort of that angle. And I'm curious if do you see both models happening, or is this something that has evolved? How has this goal of using capitalism for good over the last 15, 20 years evolved? Because we've seen it kind of come up a few times, and I'm curious just your overall thoughts, if you have any,
I think a lot of founders go in with good intentions, right,
yeah,
to achieve a mission and to build something that's sustainable, like you mentioned. But I think what's interesting about it in the present moment compared to maybe years past is that I think it's more quantifiable than ever, like in terms of what your impact is. And I think that's finding these funders and investors that actually believe in both the return, but also quantifying that the impact that your business is having. I think in the case of Sybil or ours, it's legitimately you can see in numbers who you're helping, but also being able to quantify maybe even the economic strength you're building by providing the access to services like ours. I think that's maybe what's changed a little bit, which is great. And I encourage more people. I know there's a lot of students here today to consider going down this path. It is definitely lonely being an entrepreneur, but there's a lot more avenues, I think, to be able to take on both a mission and build a sustainable, scalable business today.
Yeah, I think the first time that I got inspired to think about social entrepreneurship was when I was studying for my master's at Cambridge. I was going for a degree in development economics, and my dream was to work for a big intergovernmental organization. My dream came true. I had an internship at one in Paris, and I just realized that government agencies take so long for change to happen, and part of what it means to be an institution is to normalize behaviors and outcomes, which we need. But when it comes to problems like children needing to enter the workforce, we have a very limited time frame in which we can support them. And I remember just going to different social impact talks, and I was so inspired by social entrepreneurs who really believe that you could do good for yourself and for others. And I think that as a student, it's just not something I thought was possible. But more and more, as I studied different business models, and I saw individuals who, quite frankly, have helped more people than a lot of these large organizations have, it really inspired me to just think more critically about where the market value was and how I could be a part of it.
Yeah. And tactically, I guess as you're thinking about potentially pursuing this, first of all, there is funding out there. So there are great organizations like Samvid Ventures who are, as part of their philanthropy, see the for-profit business formation as being critical to moving the needle on their social impact goals. So they're trying to impact economic mobility. They do things like fund scholarships too, right? So they're doing things that are purely philanthropic. And they've decided that a use of dollars, and it's not about maximizing returns for them. Techstars always focus on maximizing IRR, and they share in those returns. But there were better ways to get an IRR for Samvid. They've decided that they want to enable the entrepreneur capability to thrive on the problems that are intractable for economic mobility. And this is happening in a lot of different categories, and so that's where you're seeing the social impact investing come from. And just to drive that home a little bit on how that then results in companies, right? So one of the themes that we're seeing across the portfolio, for instance, this year, is that a lot of companies are unlocking piles of money that are out there from even government organizations or schools or other things that are out there looking to be deployed, and users who need that. So low to moderate income users who need that money, and the missing gap is makes it untappable. So whether that is what Impactica is doing on giving people the capability to tap benefits that are out there. For lack of the technology to do it, makes it really difficult. We have a Columbia graduate who's doing one on using called Snappable. Lulu is doing a company called Snappable, which is about tapping federal dollars that exist that are getting undeployed for nutrition incentives for SNAP benefits. So if you go and buy fruits and vegetables with your SNAP benefits, you should be able to get 2x the dollars for it. If only the paper system's kept up, and if only the grocer wanted to enroll in this thing when they have to do a lot of paperwork. And by the way, they're rolling out about 6 grocers per year in New York for this, and there are hundreds of millions of dollars sitting there to be deployed, which would help grocers in New York, that would help the consumers in New York, but for lack of the technology to do it, those dollars aren't getting tapped. So enter motivated entrepreneur willing to go fight really hard for moving the needle on how government thinks and getting grocers to take it so that people can benefit from these dollars that are sitting out there. So that's where entrepreneurship and social impact, and we have half a dozen examples of things like that in the class, where entrepreneurs can be the unlock to things that are big entities. You don't have to go necessarily boil the ocean on your own and create policy change. You just have to tap existing policy and make it accessible. So those are opportunities for aspiring entrepreneurs to go have an impact.
That's really fascinating. Think about your questions. I actually have a couple of other reflections on these, and then we're going to open it up for questions. I really encourage you to raise your hand and try to make it fair, because I do know some of you. I'll ask Keith to be the one to pick the questions. But let me just one thing that I've also reflected as I was hearing you and thinking about this is that I really like Kevan's point that impact is quantifiable. I think there's 2 more things going on now, which is the previous version of social entrepreneurship was about today's version is about technology for good. So yours are very technology-based services. Actually, the previous ones used to focus on problems that were sort of like, how do you set up better hand washing? How do you set up malaria nets? Things like that used to be less focused on the use of IT and those kind of things. That's one difference I noticed. And the other that I think is really interesting is that it's a lot more local. So it used to be a lot focused on international development, and that was very good. But I think much less was focused on local problems. And I think one thing that has happened is that there's been a huge recognition that there's also separate, on top of the important international development problems, a lot of problems to be tackled within the United States. And the third of that, I think, is that the previous version had a focus of sort of government is slow, capitalism is good, right? Microfinance came sort of from that idea. In the work you're doing, it turns out to be a lot more complementary to government. So the Snappable example, it's actually about how to make this government program work well rather than superseding it. So I think those are some interesting things where this new generation is actually somewhat different. Okay, so do we have any questions?
Hi there, my name's Evelise Vargas. I'm an early stage investor at Zeal Capital Partners, so impact-oriented investment firm.
Yep.
Good to see you, Keith. My question is related to that last question that you asked and referenced around ecosystem and like actual place. I'm born and raised in New York. That's part of why I love being here in this space. And I'm just curious, like, how you think about place with the problems that you're solving. And Samvid is like New York City yeah, okay. So just curious for the entrepreneurs, how you all think about place and how place informs the work that you're aiming to do.
So I'm also from New York, born and raised. No, I mean, I think just in a city like New York with so many 8 million people, such a significant portion of them rely on these essential benefits. New York happens to be, New York City especially, happens to be a better place relative to a lot of the country. So I think for us, when we were looking into how do we drive institutions to adopt like API-driven practices in what they do, and luckily New York actually happens to be quite good at that as a city and a state. So I think it was instructive. I think because they understood sort of the assignment of what was necessary to address this population. Not that it's perfect. Nothing's ever perfect. But I think a little bit to Jorge's point is that like New York, and especially the ecosystem of startups that we see in our space in social enterprise, there's ability to coexist with these institutions, right? The idea is not to disrupt them. I think maybe in a lot of entrepreneurship tends to look at how do you disrupt an existing institution. But the reality is there's enough room and scalability in our technology to coexist and complement what these institutions do. So I think that's how I tend to think about this, is really not to obviate the need for government, but how do you make government better? So I think that's like, if that helps answer your question, I think it's looking at how even the government has tried to tackle this, but how do you bring that to scale nationally where the problem persists outside of where I'm from, which happens to be doing it in a pretty decent job. But so.
Yeah, also born in New York, not raised, moved to Florida pretty early on. For us, I think it's really important that we target kids who otherwise wouldn't have access. And so with my previous business, I think tutoring is definitely in the social impact space, particularly because we worked with nonprofits and NGOs, but still we were targeting students that had families that could afford to have them receive the private tutoring. And so I think I'm a lot more nuanced right now in terms of who we're targeting. So Title I schools, for example, are a great segment for us to target because these are kids that are coming from economically disadvantaged communities that maybe don't have a direct pathway to college. I think also thinking about like cities like Chicago, we're talking to Hope Chicago right now, cities where there's a lot of inequality when it comes to economic mobility, I think are also really important for us to target. And taking that local impact and taking it to a national level, like Kevan's mentioned, is something that we're thinking about deeply. And so working with NGOs, let's say like the YMCA or the Urban League, that automatically instill themselves in communities that don't have resources, I think is a really great way for us to think about enlarging that pipeline. And so, being disadvantaged has a lot of different shapes and sectors. We all have different identities that we carry and navigate throughout life. And so for us, it's really finding those kids who truly don't have another pathway and really need our support.
I'll add one thing to that. I mean, they did a great job talking about places between different cities. Often we see inequality also manifest within neighborhoods, within a city. And when I'm a techno-optimist, I'm hoping that the kind of technological things they do actually allow neighborhoods to matter less from that perspective, or that inequality to be a little bit manifest to neighborhoods. I don't know, anything to add, Keith?
Yeah. I think part of your question might have been also, this place effect where you want to start a company as well? Is that, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, and I think, and so this is actually a deeply held Techstars belief, because we run this as a distributed network of nodes, literally across the world. About 2/3 of our programs in the U.S. We're in Europe, we're in Asia, we're in Africa, and it also aligns heavily with Steve Case's book. So Rise of the Rest Revolution Fund that he runs, and it's the third wave, I think it's called. But the concept is the first, the concept that, as Steve Case describes it, is that the first two waves of internet disruption were first internet architecture and then mobile. And those, the applications that moved quickly in those phases were tech disruptors of industries that were relatively easy to disrupt. And therefore, it makes a lot of sense to aggregate in a place where tech is going to be the thing, AKA Silicon Valley, and you end up with a lot of the first couple waves coming there. In the third wave, you end up in industries that are harder to disrupt because there are gatekeepers, or government, and things that move slowly. And you want to be closer to the action of where those things are happening as a result. So having a health tech company close to one of the gatekeepers, if you want to go do the work of those gatekeepers, so near Mayo or in Boston or in LA, where we have a health program in LA. When we do a longevity program in DC, where the policymakers are, when we're doing an economic mobility, a huge number of funders and leading thinkers are in New York, and we're able to surround the company. When we look for the best mentors nationally for the companies, about half of them are in New York, and so they come by the office. The other half will tap distributed. So I think it makes a lot of sense if you're trying to be intentional about where to start your startup. If it's just pure tech and you're trying to disrupt, ride sharing, then go to Silicon Valley. If you're in an industry where it's slower moving, or there's a policy initiative, not just pure tech, go to the place where you have easy access to the people who are making the policy or the people you need a partnership with. And advertisement for New York is a great place for a lot of those industries.
Next question. Oh, we have a lot of hands. Thank you. I think Keith. There we go. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you so much. So I had a question to Keith, but also anyone can answer. So you mentioned like the Techstar focus on the IRR and basically the principle that like the higher the profits, the company will reach a higher number of people, so the impact will be higher. So does this also mean that like you think, for example, being a nonprofit in certain cases kind of hinders growth and like effectiveness, or like is there a very clear logic or like clear distinction between like where being a nonprofit would make more sense and like being versus like being a for-profit company would make more sense? So like if I basically like wanted to have social impact in the work that I do, how do I know if like a nonprofit is the best way to do that, or like if a social venture is the best way to do that?
Great question, and I should say also relevant to that. Before Techstars, I worked as an entrepreneur in residence for an impact fund that did both not-for-profit grant giving as well as they had the full spectrum of investment vehicles. And I think the delineation is so I'll tell you my bias is that if it's something that can be done as a for-profit entity, I think that has a lot of advantages, because if you can be self-sustaining and not rely on ongoing having to go out for grants, then you can build and keep building off of making money from someone who might be indirect. Maybe you're not charging the user. Like a lot of our companies, if you're helping low to moderate income users as your benefit, they're often not the payer, but there's someone interested in paying for that, whether it be the community college that wants to attract them, or the employer who wants to attract people who they want to demonstrate have the capability but aren't credentialed, or government agencies or whatever it might be. But if you can build that as a for-profit, you're self-sustaining and open to exponential growth. So my bias would be, if you have the ability to do it as a for-profit, to me it's preferable. And so the funders that I've worked with who have this, who can do any of the above as their funding, they could give a grant, they like the for-profit ones because it means that, hey, we can catalyze, but we're not your forever funder. We get you off the ground, and then, boy, these dollars went a long way because you can now support yourself. There are some things that just don't lend themselves to that, and then a not-for-profit makes sense. But I personally, and as you're seeing my bias, but I would always favor the for-profit if you have the choice.
And to add on to that, I think it also gives you a lot more autonomy to work on problems that maybe are more nuanced. And so I started a nonprofit in Haiti before starting my business, but I was really frustrated because the type of innovation that I wanted to bring, being a Haitian American, talking to people in the community, were not things that foundations wanted to fund. And the beauty of being a business owner is that I can continue to refine who my ideal customer profile is. And so as I go out there and I learn more about their needs, I can shift more easily. But if I had stayed as a NGO or a non-for-profit, I wouldn't have been able to make those shifts as well.
All right, we have 3 minutes, and so we'll get the last question, but we'll have to answer quickly. And so I see a hand up there. Or two hands. Why don't you guys ask both questions quickly so we try to get to, but if you wouldn't mind also introducing yourself in 10 seconds so we know who it is.
Sure. My name's Emily Ford. I'm an alum of Columbia Business School. And I will try to make my question short. I'm interested in unintended outcomes and learnings from that. So you've mentioned a couple times that impact is more quantifiable than ever. But are you also looking at, things that you didn't expect to find? Or, just interested in hearing about some of the unexpected, unanticipated outcomes that you've discovered in each of your journeys.
And the other question,
Does this work? Okay, cool. My name is Antung Nguyen. I am with Democracy at Work Institute, partner with the Tamara Center on some things. I have a question. We're hearing about entrepreneurship as a solution, but also at this end, government being slow, et cetera. However, I think there's a little bit of a conflation here because ultimately, isn't government about the policy mechanisms to facilitate these kind of opportunities? So, for example, with regards to tutoring, we're dealing with issues like, tuition that is sky high and, these kinds of like policy issues. So I guess my question is, how are the solutions that you're seeking to implement as entrepreneurs actually complementing overall long-term policy solutions that need to be implemented in order for actual inequality to be reduced?
Two great questions. The first one, unintended outcomes in your efforts. The second one, well, ultimately, a lot of what you're solving does need policy, and how does that feed back into the cycle? Anybody would want to share anything to add?
I think coming into what we did on the unintended consequences part was, I think we recognized that there's an opportunity to help people enroll in more benefits, but I think we didn't fully understand actually to the extent to which people were under-enrolling in multiple programs. I think realizing that we can actually help people secure even more benefits than even sometimes caseworkers understood them to be eligible for. I think like you look at great policy implementations recently, like an earned tax credit or a child tax credit, that people didn't realize that if you provide all the documentation, let's say file your taxes, you're gonna be more readily available to accept something like that. So I think we got into this specifically around applications, but learning that, the same financial data can help in a multitude of other ways with navigating government services without necessarily even need to necessarily change government. Because I think, to get to your question, almost to bring them together, is I think a lot of these systems were put in place to make these systems accessible and these programs accessible. The challenge is really when you're dealing with hundreds of millions of people, or tens of millions of families at least, it's very hard to size all of these the same way to ensure that everyone's got the same capability of assembling that documentation, and then also everything compounds on top of each other in terms of policy of, well, we need to account for this exception and this exception. So what we approach that with is, where's the universal component, which is the financial demonstration to access benefits, and solve from there and see if that can help change maybe even what policy might be in the future of how you need to do financial demonstration. You're seeing the ability to use other data sources in the future. I think you've recently seen that the IRS is releasing its own direct file system. Like these come from recognition of these challenges that previous existing policy might have covered the majority of people, but ultimately may not have been the ultimately best solution for everyone. That helps answer both questions a little bit.
No, you did. That was a great answer, touching on both. We're out of time unless Chrissybil or Keith have any like one-line thing to add there?
I'll give you my one line on policies. I don't think entrepreneurs are in a position to impact policy. I think you want to, until you get really big, so work with the policies that are out there and try to see where you can make change by delivering on policy opportunities.
Well, please join. What an amazing panel, by the way. This was a great conversation. We have different types of perspectives, very complementary, but really targeting different ways that we're going to think about capital for good and social enterprises. To me, at least, it really reignited my passion for the social impact of entrepreneurship and helped me rethink how that is going to play out in the upcoming decade. And so thank you very much. Please join me in thanking Keith, Kevan, and Chrissybil for being here.